Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. I'm your host, Marianne, and today I have LauraAura joining me. LauraAura is an alignment coach who guides women as they learn how to truly listen to what they want instead of what they've been taught they should do or should want. Laura is also the CEO of Works & Co., an urban branding studio, the host of the Gutsy Podcast. She's a speaker, author, and all-around visionary. Laura, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you. We share a lot of the same common themes that we like to talk about, so I'm excited to get into a few. But before we do that, I typically like to ask the guest to give a little background, tell us how you got here, what brought you into this space. So can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not been a straight road by any means. And I'm not really sure that I've met a person yet that it has been. So I just want to acknowledge that first and foremost. You know, I started this kind of like my overall journey 16 years ago when I started my branding agency. And through starting a business, I did not realize how much I would learn about myself.
Yes.
And how much of my human self actually gets amplified. You know, running a business, being a leader, making adjustments in your life, you know, when you're in charge of a lot of things, as many women are, the spotlight kind of gets put on you. And not always from other people, but from within.
Yeah.
And so I've grown the business and it's gotten to, you know, this point and I've learned so much about who I am and this concept of how often we give away ourselves unintentionally by folding and adapting to what the world and situations and circumstances and other people's expectations tell us that we should. And so in our careers and in our life and in our friendships and in our relationships and whatever, any aspect of your life, we are so quick to put ourselves on the back burner, to quiet our wants and our needs, to dismiss what our gut is telling us and just keep plowing forward. And I did that for more years than I even care to admit, but I also own and honor that as well, because that was the season that I was in. The only way out is through. And sometimes you don't even know that you're working your way out.
100%.
Right? Like it's just this journey. So, you know, through the branding agency, I learned that I love having conversations about the shit that's happening in your head. It's something that lights me up. I started interviewing people on what used to be called the Green Couch Project. That was a full in-house production. And that got a little bit heavy, but my heart was like, more of this. So how do we do that? So I figured out how to launch a podcast, hence the Gutsy Podcast, which is now 4.5 years old, which has continued to lead me to guiding and helping driven women, right? To relearn who they are, what they do, what they actually want, and then starting to do it through tiny conscious decisions and steps.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big piece of it, right? Just being conscious and really starting to recognize the patterns in your life and what's going on and your default positions. And then you can take the pause and start making changes. But it's definitely becoming aware, I think, is always the first step.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I didn't say in your bio, but is a line, I'm going to read it. It says that you're the first person to push someone out of their comfort zone and the last to hug them as they head to the next level of their life. And I love that. And when I read it, I thought, well, that's exactly what's needed to push people away from what they're resisting, to do the work to figure out what that is. What is it that they're resisting? And then, as you say, sort of use that as your power, use the resistance as your power. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a tricky one, right? You do often have to sort of get in someone's head and push them.
Yes. So That's a part of me that I have not always allowed to be out, right? It was one of those things where, as a child, being outspoken or speaking my truth or saying anything, honestly, was not celebrated. In fact, there was usually some sort of consequence that came along with it. So from a very early age, I learned that my voice and my thoughts and my feelings were not safe to express. And so I shoved them down and abided by what everyone else needed of me, became what society expected of me. But my soul is fiery. She is fiery and she does not settle. And, as I started to transition away from branding and more into teaching, coaching, and speaking, I'm a very intuitive person. It's one of my gifts and abilities. And I just always get these nudges, right? These like, hey, this person needs to hear this right now. And it's like this kind of tiptoe into like, ooh, like, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want to offend you. I don't want to come across as harsh or, just be like that person. And I found that you can be honest and guide people without being an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's so much about like, look, you can get online or talk to anybody and get coddled and see a fluffy quote and just like all this like rainbows and butterfly stuff, and everything has its time and place, right? I'm not knocking that stuff. But when you're really ready to make a change in life, you need somebody that's going to hold the space to challenge your bullshit. And the more that I find, the more that I just do that, the more people raise their hand and they're like, we want more of you.
Well, because you're leaning into the true you, right? I mean, that is who you are.
Yeah. I can see and feel through things, through your energy, through your words, through your body language, and just a knowing. And what that allows us to do is to get to the root of something actually very, very quickly. Sometimes we think that these things take like months or years to discover. In 20 or 30 minutes, we can be to the root of something. And now you know where to go from here, right? So, but I do this in a space where not only am I just calling things for what they are and challenging those limits that you've had, but also wrapping my arms around you, right? Like I'm incredibly supportive. I'm number one on your team, if not in the top 5, right? I want to see you win. I want to see you succeed. If I didn't, I wouldn't share these things with you. So it is absolutely this, I'm not even going to call it balance because I think that that's a word that puts another should on us, but it's this perfect mixture of holding your ass accountable and also supporting the crap out of you along the way.
So when people get these breakthroughs and they have the realizations, with a little pushing, you talk about turning that resistance into their power. Talk about that. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So there's a saying that I say a lot in my reels that always gets a lot of traction and a lot of people wound up, I think, in the best of ways. And that is the thing that you want the most is often behind the thing that you resist the most. And if we can, it's one of those things, it grows in your brain. You'll think about me 3 hours from now and you'll be like, damn it, Laura. And the truth behind it is like when we start to acknowledge what we actually want, we can then start to recognize how we're resisting it as well. And people are often like, well, why would I resist the thing that I want? Like, that's the thing that I want. It's because you're challenging your habits. You're challenging your knowing. You're challenging subconscious, deep, deep, deep rooted subconscious beliefs. And anytime you go against what your body and mind are familiar with, you're going to be presented with resistance.
Yeah.
The incredible thing with that is when you recognize it, now you get to consciously choose different.
Yeah.
And doing that over and over and over again leads to the change that you're looking for.
So 2 things I want to dig into further there. Breaking patterns, changing habits, right? So I know that's something that, again, in common that we talk about, and that's a big focus in this group. And then let's touch that. But then also I want to go to that chatter in your head. So those voices that tell you you shouldn't push through that, whether it's diet and, you're getting the chatter to eat something you really don't need to eat, or telling you not to exercise because you're tired, or telling you this relationship's going to fail because it's failed 27 times before, or whatever it is, right? Or don't take the job because it's scary. Those voices are very, very persistent.
They are very persistent. They're very loud, and they're often very clear.
Yeah.
So that voice that you're hearing is a combination of two things. One, it's all living from in your subconscious. So that's where you're operating out of, like at least 95% of your day is through your subconscious mind. I look at this as like going down a dirt road. So this dirt road has been there for 100 years. The grooves are in the road. As soon as you turn on it, your wheels just click right into it, right? And that's how your subconscious mind works. It's these deeply grooved patterns in your mind. And when you go to do something, or, even like something's going well, and then your mind's like, oh, no, this is where everything falls apart, right? Like it's because we're associating with a groove that has been there for a long time. So it's usually a past experience that we have a formed memory on.
Yeah.
And or it's someone else's voice. Something that someone said to you, something you overheard, something you read online that got imprinted in your brain.
And you didn't even know. Didn't even know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that thought in your mind, I call it mind fuckery. I teach a workshop on it because it is so relevant to every single human on the planet. Those voices get loud, but I want everyone to know that you have the opportunity to shift that. Like it doesn't have to continue that way. And you can shift away from those thoughts and those feelings. Now, it's not to say that you're never going to think or feel them again. I think that also often gets misunderstood. Like, okay, well, I've healed this and I've worked through this. So, now it's never going to appear again. Oh no, here it is. Now I've failed. Right. And then we're literally repeating the exact same cycle that we're breaking.
Yeah.
So it's really about having better tools in your toolkit to handle it differently when it comes up again, instead of it ruling your life. So the voices are absolutely loud, but you, my friend, have the conscious ability to shift how those things impact you.
I think a lot of people try to portray that the voices should go away, right? That you should be able to retrain your brain, and you can, right? We know that there's a lot of science now that talks about that. But I'm glad you said, because I often say it as well, it doesn't go away. That, the patterns you're trying to break, they're still there. Like it's been ingrained in you for X amount of years, depending on age, right? Most of us aren't spring chickens where we've lived a little, and that stuff does remain, but it's learning to become aware when it pops up and how to handle it, how to make a conscious choice, how to reframe things, have a different perspective. So I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people try to say that it stops, and I don't think it does. I don't think it ever stops.
It doesn't. And if you think about it, every single day we're creating new experiences.
Yeah.
So we're hearing new voices, we're seeing new things, we're going through new life challenges and victories. So we're continuously creating new grooves in our mind. And inevitably, there's going to be another tough one at some point, right? And I don't say that to be discouraging. I say that to be honest.
It's life. It's real life. Life is complicated and messy, and it's hard. That's the tagline of my show, what the premise of the whole thing was built on. It's real life.
Yes. It's the readjustment of the expectation. So again, that when it does show up, okay, now I'm better equipped to shift this so that I don't go on this windy, twirly shutdown for months at a time.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I want to go back. So when you were talking about sort of when you were younger years, you said something or alluded to the fact that you were basically told to stay small.
Yes.
To kind of push your voice down and not really be who you were meant to be. And I've heard a lot of women in my private Facebook group and listeners, and there's a common theme between many of us. I think there's a lot of, strong women who've been people pleasers, who are now looking at their life at this middle age and saying, how did I get here? That kind of thing. And that theme keeps coming up about people feeling like they had to stay in this container that kept them at a certain size, that forced them to be a certain way or to interact with people in a certain way. This container that didn't allow them to be all they were meant to be. What recommendations do you give to people to sort of lean into who they really are and let themselves be big and not be afraid to be big, whatever big looks like for them?
Yeah. I just want to extend so much love to anyone that's listening that has felt that, because I know that firsthand.
Yeah.
I know what that feels like. And how that usually then looks in adulthood is when I ask them, what do you actually want? Who are you? Who do you want to be?
They don't know. I was going to fill in that blank for you. They don't know. I've been there.
It's a blank stare.
Yeah.
No clue. And again, if that's you, it's okay, right? That this episode that you're listening to today, that you consciously or subconsciously chose to listen to, can be the first step to figuring that out. And then it doesn't have to be figured out by 5 o'clock today, right? Because I know how you are. You want to rush through things and you want to plow it out and you want to get a game plan and like you want to control the whole situation. Are you feeling seen and heard right now?
I'm making faces, you guys, because I feel seen. Yeah,
Yes.
of course, right?
Yes. That's not the goal. Okay. The goal is less control and more curiosity.
Let's talk about that. It's abstract to some people. It's conceptual. It's hard to put that down into like, what does that look like? What do you mean by that? So elaborate. What do you mean by that? Let's tell them.
Yeah. So when we're in the discussion of like, who are you and what do you want? And you're like, I have no idea. Where do I even start? I often recommend checking back into things that used to bring you a lot of joy. What did you used to do that filled your tank, that was fun for you, that didn't really have necessarily rules or regulations, right? Like maybe you loved to paint. Maybe you loved to go hiking. Maybe you liked to bike by the lake. Maybe you like to have random ass dance parties. I don't know. What are some things that you used to do? And this could be a year ago or 20 years ago that brought you some joy and excitement. When is the last time that you allowed yourself to do one of those things? And if we really start to lean into, that's where the curiosity comes into play of, what used to light me up? And in the same respect, get curious about what you're kind of interested in right now without the need to master things.
That's key. That is key. Allow
Yes.
yourself to be a beginner, right?
Yes.
Not be afraid to fail.
Yes.
Because the type of women that we probably attract are used to succeeding at a lot of things and being really good at a lot of
Yes.
things. That's hard.
It is hard, but that's also a story that we tell ourselves.
100%.
If we're consistently saying, this is hard, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't figure this out, it's not going to work anyway, it's probably a waste of time. What do you think that your brain and your body is telling itself every day? You're giving it information every single moment. And with enough conviction and enough like repetition, it starts to believe you. And so get curious about things and experiment with stuff without the need to master anything. Your craft doesn't need to become a business. Your hobby doesn't need to become like a mega whatever. You don't have to become like the next best TikToker by making content just because you felt curious about it. Like give yourself the option to just play with it and see where that starts to lead you, because we are so wrapped up, right? Like our energy is tight up against us, almost like we're mummies wrapped up. And when we start to play and get curious, we start to unravel some of that. Like your soul can breathe for the first time in maybe decades.
Yeah.
And then information starts to flow to you and ideas start to come to you and opportunities start to present themselves, right? Like we have this thought that like, if we sit down and we plan everything to death and that's how we're going to control this and that's how we're going to make it happen. When really it is so much easier and, might I say, way more enjoyable to enjoy things and play with things and lean into stuff and allow that, like you're drawing things to you. That stuff will literally come out of left field. And I know that might seem a little abstract to some of you, but
it will.
Are you where you want to be right now?
Yeah.
And has what you've been doing working for you? If not, maybe give this a go, right? And if it's not for you, then it's not for you, right? That's okay.
I like what you said there. And I just want to reinforce for people that are having a hard time getting started and don't know where to begin trying to find something that they can try. I like telling people to kind of think about the things that they used to love to do. One of the exercises that I talk about, obviously I didn't think it up, but I heard it somewhere as well. And I think it really works well, is doing some journaling around just imagining yourself at like 9, 10, 11 years old. What are those things? Because I found the more people I've talked to about this, many of us had those tendencies back then, many of us. And it might not have looked like, running a podcast. But for me back then, I wrote on the newspaper in my elementary school. Like there's so many common themes. And I know a lot of people have that as well. And that's a really good exercise, I think, for people to get started with. It's fun too. I think the harder, and I'm using that word on purpose, the harder one for people, the more challenging, more uncomfortable one is exactly what you talked about, trying something new and being curious about it. Because I do think, and I'm right there, I had to battle this when I started my podcast, is being okay just showing up and taking that first step and not knowing all the steps. That was like the hardest thing for me, not knowing all the steps and just saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to see where it goes and how I feel about it. And I think people just really need to get willing and curious, like you said, and try new things. It just can lead you to places, like you said. I mean, I could so relate to when you said it lets your soul breathe, because sometimes you don't even know you need that until you start on that journey. Is that what you found as well?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like, that's the thing. Most people are walking around kind of in this like awake sleep, right? Like we're
zombies.
We're physically awake, but like we're not alive.
Yeah. Yes.
We're just existing.
Yes.
We're going through the to-do list. We're making sure all the responsibilities are taken care of. We're making sure that our family members and our coworkers and our employees are taken care of. And then you get to the end of the day and you're depleted.
Yeah, what's left?
Right? That spark is gone. And I know that many of you get to the end of the day and you're like, okay, I don't want to play. I'm exhausted. I don't have time to be curious about what I'm interested in. And I hear you, but I'm also going to challenge you because it's also a decision.
Yeah.
Because like I said way earlier, we unintentionally give away parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't make time for you, it's not going to happen. And so that sometimes looks like saying no to something, setting up some boundaries, carving in intentional time. If you are a calendar person, blocking in an hour for yourself or 20 minutes, or hell, start with 5, right? Like change doesn't have to be this big monumental thing. And I call it messy action.
Yeah.
Like what you were just saying. We get caught in the bigness of something like,
yes.
Oh, okay. I want to change my life. So that means I got to quit my job and sell my house and move across the country and change my wardrobe and dye my hair and get my nails done and get a new notebook. Right. Like, I'm like, hold the horses, my friend. Like, let's pull it back. That bigness is going to stop you every single time.
Yes.
Your brain and your body cannot calibrate all of that information at once. So what is one next thing that you can do?
Yes.
One singular thing. And you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to have the perfect plan. It doesn't need to be like shiny in a brand new notebook. Just what is one next thing that you can do? Is it signing up for a class? Is it journaling? Is it calling up a friend and going and having lunch with her because you haven't seen her and you keep talking about it, right? Like it's little tiny decisions that add up to this kind of like reboot of you where you start to come alive again. And again, we're unwrapping more of that mummy.
And as you do them, as you take the steps and give yourself permission, I think you have to give yourself permission to do that, it becomes easier.
Yes.
It becomes easier. I can remember when I started this journey a handful of years ago and taking 5 minutes to do nothing, like literally not be productive. It was hard. It was like not something I had ever done. And now I don't think about if I'm playing with my granddaughter, I'm hanging out and doing something fun. My brain's not going, oh, you should be doing the housework. You should be doing whatever, something for work, right?
Yep.
But that takes those little steps, those little actions, messy actions. I'm glad you called it that. I like that. It takes that to show up for yourself and to start creating that pattern of giving yourself that time.
Yeah, because when you start to get like a little taste of who you actually are, it's incredible.
You remember.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like you start to remember. You're like, oh,
there I am.
I forgot that I love to do this. I forgot that I love downtime. I forgot that I love to dance ridiculously in my bedroom, right? Like you start to like remember like, oh, I really value having 30 minutes of uninterrupted time to read a book and light my favorite candle. I mean, sometimes it's really simple stuff.
Yeah.
But again, choosing yourself, in little tiny moments, it's a little turn of the dial every single time, you remember more and more each time.
Yeah.
And with enough of that, you get to the point where now you become non-negotiable.
Yes.
And that, my friend, is where you become fire.
La, 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 la. Yeah, yeah. Right. That's it. That is what we should be striving for. Ah, fascinating. So talk to me a little bit about the journey to not being so much of a people pleaser, because you talked about that at the beginning. We've woven that into kind of the topic a lot, but I think it ties into what we were just talking about, because people don't show up for themselves. They don't allocate calendar times for themselves. They have just been, I'll use the word trained to show up for everybody else, whether that's family or work or whatever. So how do you suggest to people to start breaking that pattern?
Well, first, acknowledge it. Because again, it's this autopilot deal where we don't even realize that we're saying yes to every single thing. We're jumping every time somebody asks us to do something. We're packing our calendars when we really want some free time, right? Like we're doing all these things. Just start to notice it, right? Bring awareness to it, bring some life to it so that you can start to spot it when it presents itself. I promise you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's a good,
Right.
that's a good thing. That is a good thing, because we want to shift that. I also want to debunk something, because oftentimes people think that you're either a people pleaser or you hate helping people. And it is so not that.
Yeah.
There's a very big difference between people pleasing and helping others.
Mm-hmm.
When you're people pleasing, you're doing things for the validation through others. Whereas when you're helping others, you're pouring into them. It's coming from a selfless place. And so when you start to shift that energy and say, okay, I can't expend myself anymore and I'm not willing to, but I really love to help people. Okay, that's great. You can still help people and not be a people pleaser. If you have people pleasing tendencies, you have to be a little bit more consciously aware, because it's very easy to snap back into that routine, right? But again, noticing it, you're going to see it. And when you see it, you can say, okay, I can't do these things, but how can I contribute? What can I do to help them? What limits can I set? And so you can pour from, I'll use the analogy, pour from a fuller cup when you have taken care of your own self and your own needs first. Instead of you going to the very end of the list, my friend, you need to come to the front.
Yeah.
Point and blank. That is a habit. That is a story. And that is something that you're allowing every single day. And I understand that that is oftentimes tied with past experiences, and maybe it hasn't been safe in the past. And so I just want to recognize and acknowledge that. But you get to now choose what that looks like, and choosing to shift how you're showing up for others really can make a profound difference.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize what you said about setting those boundaries and putting yourself first. I think when you put yourself first and you allow yourself time, give yourself permission, I'll use that word again, you do fill yourself up and you're able to give better, more fully. Yeah, I think it comes from a different place at that point, but I think it's really important to just allow that shift.
Yeah. And again, you can help others. You don't have to give that up. So many people, when I talk about this online, they're like, "Oh, so you're just saying like be greedy and never help anybody ever again?" Did I say that? Absolutely not, sir. I did not. Thanks for noticing, but I did not. It's really about this decision that I'm no longer willing to put myself last.
Yeah, that is it. That's key.
That is it. And
Yeah.
when you do that, when you truly actually take care of yourself, and I know that if you're listening, this is not the first time you've heard this.
Right. Right.
I know it's not.
But it takes
maybe today it'll hit a little bit different.
Yeah.
That you're allowed to take care of yourself first. Taking care of yourself first makes you a better person for you, and it makes you a better person for the people around you.
Yeah.
You get to show up to helping people with renewed energy and new ideas, and like, let's do this, instead of, oh my gosh, okay, I told you I would help you, but now I got to do this thing, and now I got to bake these things, and we're moving the Saturday, like it's a totally different energy. So are you going to decide to take care of your own self first? Or are you going to keep feeling the way that you're feeling? That's what it boils down to.
Agreed. So one of the things that I just did a segment on, and I've been on a personal journey this year as well, is to bring more play and fun into my life. I think similarly to some of the other topics we've talked about, it's a common one for this demographic to have forgotten how to have fun.
Yeah.
Forgotten how to give yourself permission to have the time to have fun. So A, any tips on that? And B, how do you bring that into your life?
Yeah. Fun and play gets to look different for everybody. And that's one of the coolest things about it, right? Like the way that I play might look different than the way that you play. It looks different than the person that's listening, how they like to play. And so what does play mean to you? Like what feels interestingly fun to you? Some people, it's a more elaborate, like going on a trip or, going away for the weekend or, doing something. For some people, it's just sitting down and reading a book or making a craft or hanging out with a friend or going to, to discover a new town, right? Like it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're safe, of course. It doesn't matter what it is. It comes down to, are you allowing yourself to do it?
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite ways to play, I talk about dance a lot. I'm not a dancer by any means, but in my spirit, I am. And I notice that like when I start to get kind of heavy or my brain really wants to like talk shit to me, or like I'm just like there's a lot of deadlines or just, it just kind of gets dense, right? I know that my body responds very well when I get up out of my chair. I put on some music that makes me want to shake my ass, and then I do, right? Like I just move around. I'm not trying to choreograph anything. I'm not trying to get on like any dance shows on TV. Like I don't want any of that. I just want to move the energy through my body. And that play is really fun for me, and it moves the energy and I feel better and I come back more clear-minded, but it's because I chose to allow myself to do it.
Yeah.
And that's really what it boils down to, is this fork in the road of like, okay, I can feel these things in myself. No, I got too much to do. I'm going to plow through it. Oh, I got this deadline. I'm going to keep going. Oh, somebody needs this from me. I need to get this done. Listen, play can be a 5-minute activity. It doesn't have to be a whole weekend excursion. It can be, but it doesn't have to be in every situation. So identify, what does play mean to you? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What are some tools that you can put in your toolkit that when you start feeling a certain way, you're like, oh, here are the things. Because here's the other thing. When we're in the thick of stuff, we forget.
Yeah. Yeah.
We forget. And so if you have, I'm going to challenge you, get a sticky note, write 3 things that help you to feel better through play, and just keep it with you. Put it in your wallet, put it in your bag, put it somewhere that you are frequently. And when you start getting into the thick of things, just look at it. You'll remember, and then do it for 5 minutes.
I love that.
And watch the way that your energy starts to shift. Like it is simple things, not easy, but simple things that you can do to really make a profound difference in your energy. And
I love that advice. I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on my journey and what that looked like. And, I thought that it was going to be the big things, like, going away somewhere or doing some fun adventure or whatever. It wasn't. It's the silly, crazy, playing with my granddaughter. I think one of the examples I gave, which is true story, throwing a bunch of cotton balls in the kitchen all over the place and making it look like snow. And I was thinking back to when I had my own kids, and I would have been like freaked out, like, oh my God, the house is such a mess. It took 3 seconds to clean up, and it was so fun. But it's really just loosening up and remembering that and allowing yourself again to just have those moments. It's very freeing.
And one of my secondary favorite things about the situation that you just described is not only is that filling your own inner child and your play and freeing yourself, but you're also showing the people in your life that it is okay to play, to have fun, to not be working all the time, to not be stressed all the time, right? Like they're watching, they're learning through you.
Yeah.
And it's not that anybody needs permission, but sometimes people need to see or hear it to know that it's okay. And you're setting that tone now. And how beautiful to shift the culture of our lives by showing people that it's okay to be yourself and it's okay to be happy. I mean, that is a priceless gift that you give to others.
Yeah, I love that. And breaking the pattern.
Yeah, we were not there. There were a handful of times that we played when I was little. And those few times I remember pretty distinctively because it was not quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
Right. So they stick out very, very vividly. But I think sometimes I'm like, wow, if we would have done that more often, I would have known that it was okay, but it was backed with not okayness. But now, as a mother myself, I get to change that. And my son and I are total goofballs together, right? We are just ridiculous human beings when we're together. And it is phenomenally wonderful because it reminds me that I've broken a cycle.
Yes.
And that he will never know or feel what I felt. And if he chooses to have children, they're certainly not going to know either.
I love that. And I missed that with my children. I didn't break the cycle, but I know more now and I'm doing different now. And I am setting that example with my grandchildren. So,
and wonderful for you. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's another life lesson, right? All you can do is you do the best you can with the information you have at the time, and you do better when you know better. So, hopefully it does make a difference even now with the grandchildren, even if I missed that opportunity with my children. But yeah, it's a good message for people. So before we wrap, I typically like to ask people what surprises them the most in the space that they work in. So I'm interested in you working with lots of different women and in and out of all these kind of topics we're talking about. What still surprises you the most?
I think what surprises me the most is just how disconnected nearly every woman that I come in contact with is from herself.
Yeah.
I've done this work long enough. I'm super in tune. I see it, hear it, talk about it every single day. So it's not new to me. But I have to remember that when I'm sharing information, it's often the first time that someone is going, whoa, wait a second. I didn't even realize that this was a thing. I didn't know that this is how I was living. I didn't know that I was disconnected. No one's ever asked me what I want, right? Like it's this, when I see this like kind of jolt of a wake up call, I'm like, good. And not because I want you to go down this whole thing and feel bad about yourself and all that crap. No, we're not doing that. Not in my space, not in my corner of the world, but good because now you're waking up to a different option.
Yeah, it's the start. It's the beginning.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And it just never ceases to amaze me how many people are just completely disconnected. That never ends. There's always a new batch of people. And it's like, my role in this world is to help people reconnect.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. And let me remind people to listen to the Gutsy Podcast, and we'll put all your links and everything out in the show notes. But this has been fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.